Sahana vavatu, sahanao bhunaktu, sahaviryang karavavahai, tejasvina vadhitamastu, ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Does anyone want to share? What do you think chapter 16 is about so far?
It expounds the qualities of a divine being.
Dharma and adharma.
So it is telling us about the virtues that aligns us with the grand order of the Lord, and the qualities or disqualifications which deviates us from the grand order.
Qualities that cause us to align ourselves, and ones that deviate our being, separate us from the whole, makes us insensitive, impolite, rude, rough, missing the obvious. Anything else? I mean, this is already wonderfully put.
I just think perhaps a bit on the same lines, just aligning ourselves with the laws of Ishvara for a smooth life.
A smooth life, a smooth ride, yeah. Okay, so we've gone through the divine virtues, and we're now, actually last week, we have entered the Adharmic virtues. So verse 7 to 21 commences the asura sampat. They're called demonic traits, not as in sense of, you know, teeth and blood and so on, but just traits that are, as Mina puts, that are not following, that are not aligned with that big picture. You know, they're disposed towards personal delicacies, personal fancies. So 7 to 21, what do they do? What are these, what is it Krishna trying to portray here? He's trying to bring out what causes distortions in our minds. Here we are normal, we're perceiving the world, interacting with the world, but in this, behind the scenes, there is some distortions there, and we don't pick them up. And these distortions create what we call misrepresentation. Misrepresentation is whereby we see one thing, and we that thing is represented in our mind, in our inner psychology. However, the question is, what causes it to be represented? What causes it to duplicate itself to what is actually being out there? Well, that's the natural program. The natural program causes what is outside to be duplicated in the mind. Therefore, we see what is outside. However, because there's a jiva there, we call it jiva srishti. Srishti means creation. And the jiva is a complex being. Jiva has emotionally unmet needs. Jiva has unvalidated beliefs. Jiva has unverified notions. Jiva has stuff pushed underneath the unconscious carpet. And all of that, the accumulated information at the bus stop, you know, at the telephone, all of that also contributes what is represented of the actual reality, which is called Ishvara Srishtihi. Ishvara Srishtihi is the reality that we all collectively agree upon, in which we transact and work with. If I look at a rose, assuming you're not intoxicated by something, you too will say it is a rose. Therefore, we all agree it is a rose with red petals or blue petals. That is called Ishvara Srishti, a reality that has always been there, that will continue to be there before you were born and after you will go. That reality is there. But owing to the Jiva, Srishti, it looks at this rose and says, it is not a rose, it is a poison ivy. Run. And therefore it starts to criticize the dear rose into something that it is not. So 7 to 21 is showing us how these misrepresentations occur so that we do not fall prey to them, so that we can align ourselves closer to that rose, Ishvara Srishti, and farther away from Jiva Srishti. The entire chapter 16, in fact, the entire Gita in a yogic sense, is about moving away from Jiva Srishti and coming closer to Ishvara Srishti. In fact, there is no such thing as moving or coming closer. It was always Ishvara Srishti from the beginning, but owing to carrying certain notions, they make it as if there is a difference other than Ishvara Srishti. So really it is just removing ignorance. And what kind of misrepresentations does Jiva Srishti cause? A lot of them. Suppose there's a tension that comes between a personal or a professional setting, and one of them is closer, quote, closer to Ishvara Srishti, and they're able to detect something's off here, something needs to change, we need to make a little difference, we need to add a little bit of spice, we need to be more open, more honest towards each other. And the other is listening, but they're listening through more of Jiva Srishti rather than Ishvara Srishti. Therefore, one's motivated to make a change, one's motivated to make a difference, but the other is also listening with open ears, but is unable to hear nor really take any action because Jiva Srishti is still dominating the perception. Therefore, we can see how this plays out in a relationship. It also plays out in sports. I remember in 1993, when I was a small kid, there was a lovely tennis player called Monica Seles, a Serbian woman, and a man came from the court with a 23-centimeter knife who was a fan of Steffi Graf. He came onto the court and he stabbed her. And what was the consensus? What did they find out? Because I could not let Monica Seles win. My fan was Steffi Graf. In other words, this man had a reality much bigger than the reality that was already there. And that reality is called Jiva Srishti. He was living in his own little bubble, and that bubble overridden the well-being or the ethics of the program called Ishvara Srishti. Lance Armstrong, who was a common winner in the Tour de France. One time he was found to be doping. And what did he say? He said, well, really what happened was everyone is doping, so why should I not dope also? In other words, once again, the program, how to cycle honestly, how to win honestly, that got overridden by what we call doping and then justifying that with a certain Jiva Srishti narrative. In fact, all justifications happen like this. A one-liner that lets the individual perform something that is clearly not fair nor right. We have the same thing in world disasters. I just happened to open up my email, spam, and there is an email that says subject line, donation for the humanitarian aid of Ukrainian refugees. Donate your money through this Bitcoin address. Every single time there is a disaster in the world, an earthquake or a high tide, Fukushima, there is always the same story. Someone finds a loophole, takes advantage of the gullible who want to donate money, send the money to this Bitcoin address, and we will help them out. Maybe not. It also happens in the spiritual world. There's a interesting fella called Swami N. I should not mention his full name. Always going to end with Ananda. Swami N something Ananda, who said once, I'm going to make cows speak Tamil and Sanskrit. Very interesting fella. I can make cows speak Sanskrit and Tamil. Of course, there's always an audience who are predisposed towards an asura rakshasa, tamasic mind, who will be attracted to this kind of stuff. Then we have someone called Ada. I'm not going to mention the full name. Ada. In the 1980s or the 1970s, he proclaimed himself to be an avatara. And what went down is, he said, there was never an individual like me in the past, nor will there ever be one in the future. I alone am enlightened. And then what happened was he wanted to give that enlightenment to his disciples. So what did he do? He took lots of attractive female devotees, married or not, it doesn't matter. and had lots of copulation for that for years. And then further stated, all you need to do to attain salvation is to look at my image. Click, click, there, focus on my image. Of course, the disciples being not knowing any better, they fully participated with those kinds of recommendations. One, copulate with a so-called God-man, and two, look at his image and I will attain godlyhood. Wherever there is ignorance, there is ignorance. We also have 2003. What happened there? 3G and SARS, 2009, 4G and swine flu, 2020, 5G and coronavirus. All conspiracy theories are sourced in Jiva Srishtihi, whereby it's unable to see the reality, rather something is overriding it, and thus conspiracy theories originate. Furthermore, we have same Jiva Srishtihi story in religions. There is a man called Jonathan, I think it's James something, and he was a very interesting evangelist who, and a close member, so-called close friend of D. Trump, the former US president. In 2019, what was said, and before I say that, this is the kind of man who is in his 60s or 70s, the one that you would think is very wise and has a lot of experience because thousands of people are there listening to him. Therefore, he must know his stuff. What was said? D. Trump was prophesied in the Bible. The Bible literally talks that D. Trump is going to come one day. Another man of a similar nature, Jonathan, whatever his name is, doesn't really matter. Very lovely words of a distorted mind saying, God uses imperfect people to accomplish his perfect will. He always has and he always will. That is like looking at him and saying, I like it. Here's my quote, friend, God uses imperfect people to accomplish his perfect will. You can see how Jiva Srishtihi / asura sampat works through a mind, causing one to distort Ishvara Srishtihi, the natural dharmic program, which is there too, as Meena said, making you comply with the reality so that things sustain their well-being. Once upon a time, someone thought, I am a doer enjoyer, therefore everyone else must be a doer enjoyer. Aha, so let's use this in a form of karma yoga. Let me devise a system whereby all you have to do is engage in karma yoga, which reinforces what? A doer who then enjoys his actions. Just concentrate those results onto the higher being, and you shall attain salvation after death in some place, location, heaven, wherever that is, and sport with him, whatever his name is, once again. And therefore, an institution gets created out of this one single idea that I am a doer enjoyer, therefore you too are a doer enjoyer. Create a system of karma yoga being the highest path to attain salvation. And since the ignorant who knows not any better subscribes to that same idea, goes to that institution, the institution gains traction really quickly. But not only that, since we want community, we want relationship, we want to come back to this community. But since you're there, you keep on hearing more knowledge that karma yoga is the highest path. And therefore, the ignorance gets perpetrated on that one single Jiva Srishti era, that I am a doer enjoyer. Once again, I'm not going to mention what the institution is called, but it is a massive institution. You will probably know about it. Then we have the wise Bhishma in Mahabharata. What happened there? He was unable to make a difference or change his lifelong vow to protect the throne of Hastinapur, even though he saw or witnessed the king Dhritarashtra, who had not the courage to serve the Pandavas equally as the Kauravas. Now, what do the Pandavas represent in the Mahabharata? The society that is governed by the dharmic program. Because Bhishma was close to Dhritarashtra, or so close to his vow, and the vow and Dhritarashtra were one, he was unable to see beyond. So we can even see that wise people also fall for Jiva Srishtihi. Therefore, they're unable to move out of that initial vow that is based in one's personal projection, one's era. All these examples, what do they have in common?
Is it ignorance?
Ignorance, in other words, covering the natural program, making it justifiable to act forward with that ignorant, with that distorted orientation.
Avidya Maya, as opposed to Vidya Maya.
Not in alignment with the nature's law.
Not in alignment with the natural dharmic program. Okay, anything else?
Selfishness.
Selfishness, yes. In other words, narrow-minded. In other words, a mind that is looking through a very small lens, and you cannot see what is outside. Kind of like a car, you know, you only see that little in that little rear visor, but do not see outside the periphery of that mirror. Therefore, my entire reality is on the basis of that little rear visor, and that's how the decisions get made. That's called negligence.
When you say that.
Question was, what do all these examples have in common? And one of the things that I want to bring forward is there's a desire there, because it takes a desire to apply some action, and then action builds, and then there's a consequence. Okay, we know that. But look at desire. What is desire? Desire is another natural program called Ishvara Srishtihi. It's there. The flower to blossom is a desire. For the sun to, quote, rise, it doesn't rise, but for this earth to spin is a desire of the whole planet. For seasons to come, to change, is a desire of the order. For body to grow from toddler into adulthood is a desire of the program inhering in this body. For the mind to think deeper, a little bit more wider, is a desire of the mind. So this question of elimination of desire is completely unnecessary because it is another Ishvara Srishtihi program. But what happens is, if the buddhi is established in the Jiva Srishti program, someone said narrow-mindedness, then that desire can only function through what? That small Jiva Srishti narrow-mindedness. So all we need to do is just move away from this Jiva Srishti and bring ourselves back into Ishvara Srishti, and then what happens? That desire still continues to function as it always did, but through what? A buddhi that is established with Ishvara Srishtihi. So in other words, this is a very lovely way of how to actually manage desire, because we talk about eliminating desire and, you know, finding new desires, finding better desires, but it's actually got nothing to do with desire at all. Leave desire alone, because it is Ishvara Srishtihi. All the individual has to do is change one's focus from the private, narrow-minded individual into this larger picture. And then the desire can flow through that buddhi, whereby the desire naturally finds expression through different means. Okay. Then we went into verse 7. And verse 7 talked about asura sampat. And we talked about what or how did this asura sampat come in the first place? And we just said a general picture. We said, when a person is born, what happens is they can only see or perceive through the five senses. Okay. So therefore they see individuals who are, you know, trying to find a good position in their life. They're trying to work. They're trying to make it, you know, in this life. Okay, and the individual assumes, well, that's what life must be about. And then we also see people enjoying themselves, getting a wine, you know, a little bit of entertainment, some TV. And so, okay, so this is what it's about. So naturally, the mind is going to now assume, so this is all there must be to life. So let me now optimize. Let me find new expressions within these two categories, which is artha and kama, which is security and entertainment. Therefore, the whole life becomes about kind of optimizing and changing and adding novelty to these security and entertainment issues. Now, the question is, why does this happen? The answer is because the individual, once again, is born with these 5 senses, and therefore all you have to do is open your eyes and see. There's no need to think beyond that. Okay, this is what I see. This is how reality is. But most are too busy to think beyond the obvious, beyond the gross form. Therefore, who stops and thinks, what is behind this gross form? Is there something that is holding it together? Ishvara Srishtihi. Not many of us do that. Because why? Because in the past, you want to call life, past life, I also was born as an ordinary individual with 5 senses who perceived the gross world, didn't find any reason to question it. Therefore, the inquirer's samskara never got developed. When it never got developed in the previous life. Therefore, when I get born, I simply don't question if there's something beyond these forms. In other words, it's the same story as happened in the last life. No inquirer samskara, therefore the person simply doesn't start to inquire. Unlike, for example, take Ramana Maharishi, year 16 plus minus, improvised death experience, doesn't matter what happened there. That was enough to spark, to trigger that entire samskara of inquiry. And then it led him into this huge train of thought of what reality may be about. And this is how this samskara unleashes itself, showing us it was already there, dormant, just waiting for something to trigger it. Lorena.
So what is it that causes somebody to trigger that in a particular lifetime, like in this particular lifetime, say, for example?
What causes?
To actually trigger that inquiry.
Okay, so
as opposed to a different life where, you've got the same 5 senses, obviously experiencing objects, but you never question the subject object. So what causes this inquiry?
Person is a product of their causal body. In other words, causal body is the collection of these impressions that push us towards certain ways of being, towards which make us an individual that we are. So what causes it? The person's causal body. When a person gets born, they already get born with a certain predisposition to think and to act and to perceive. And this percolates slowly through their words and through their ways of conducting themselves. Therefore, they eventually, unknowingly, come to a situation whereby they really get triggered, and that allows it to really express this fullness of that samskara, because the situation is appropriate. Just like Ramana Maharishi, that situation was highly relevant for inquiry into the nature of reality.
The potential's there in everybody, surely.
The potential is there at different degrees. For some of them are highly developed, for some of them are less developed, owing to the previous lifetime samskara. But it is there definitely for all of us. That's why we have a predisposition to, in fact, that's why you have predisposition in children to move towards what you call Daiva sampat, and others will move a little bit more attracted towards asura sampat. And the only way we can, in fact, there's many more ways to explain it. One of the ways that we can explain that innocent attraction in our kids is through that continuity of that potential, as Lorena is speaking about. Because see, even if you take a kid to let's say a asura predisposed circle, a little, asura sampat predisposed circle, it doesn't mean they're going to stay there. Even if they want company, even if they want that love, kind of be part of the gang, part of someone, kind of be with the cool kids, it doesn't mean they'll stay there. They may stay there, but then they'll move away naturally. Because why? Because their impressions, that in potential is way different, is stronger for Daiva. Therefore, they go the other way. Whereas some of them stay there and they go, okay, we're the cool kids, and therefore they just reinforce that attraction for asura sampat. Verse 8 stated that, so they say this world of people is untruthful, without ethical basis, godless, and is born of the union of male and female, is driven by passion and nothing else. So in other words, verse 8 was talking about how does one think, how does one perceive this world in reference to male and female. And we said it is passion, right? It is that's what life is about, passion. Now, you look at movies today. What is all movies about? How do you make a lot of money in movies? You put a girl there. You take a girl out, the profits fall. It's simple as that. So we can see this on a mass scale, how this works. The moment you add this romance and passion and excitement and novelty and roses and rainbows and color and sweetness, immediately we want to see that. We want, it hooks us in. So this is just the nature of what hooks the person. And it's the marketer's job, of course, to tap into the psychology of what's in that program that makes us hooked in, and therefore they pepper the whatever it is with some of that psychological triggers, and therefore we get hooked in. And then how did the world come about? It came through matter. In other words, matter comes, consciousness comes. Matter comes, the world comes. Matter comes, God comes. The idea of God comes. Matter comes, so does everything else come. Whether matter come, I do not know. In other words, it's shallow thinking. What about you? What about us people? Where do we come from? We came from our parents. We're a product of our genes. Where do genes come from? From their genes, from their parents. Where do they come from? Well, from monkeys. Okay, where was the first monkey? Oh, maybe from worms and so on. So, it has a level of thinking, but there's a certain stoppage at a certain point, because the mind cannot think in a subtle way that we are showing in Advaita Vedanta. And so all of their interests, conversations revolve around these basic principles of security and entertainment, like a date, hey, I like home and away. What do you like? Whoa, I like the beach life. Wow, that is so warm. Maybe we should go on a beach today. So it's, exciting and romance there. It's okay, fine. But that's what most conversations are about, because they're reflective of these two pursuits, security and entertainment. Entertainment can come in many forms. Massage. What do we have? Spas, Netflix, right? Huge industry there, karma. You can keep on going forever. And security. What kind of security are there? Security means securing your position, being someone, becoming someone, standing out, spotlight. Turn a spotlight, place it on myself. Okay, I've secured. That's one form of security. That's also a mixture of karma there, because some people enjoy that attention. Security in a form of big family.
Insurance.
Yeah, wow, life insurance, death insurance.
Our wealth.
Wealth, yeah, add another zero there in a bank account. Of course.
Job security.
What? Job security, yeah. Now, the other part I want to see, this is important, is that we're not implying either good or bad. We're just saying that everything has its place. Like we said, the elephant story last week. And I need to know that it's not a wall. It's a stomach. It's not some kind of a pole. It's a tusk. And I need to know what the tusk is used for. So when we know the place of every function and we use it properly, we don't make this mistake of too much of one thing and too little of one thing. We don't neglect things. So it's always nice to get educated and to improve our knowledge base so that we're able to influence those around us, because it's not just about us. It's also about those who you are associated with, and those who you are associated with. How do you change people? By being an example. And they too know other people. So in other words, it's like it spreads out. So if you, for example, were to look at your influence in 100 years, it would be massive. You may not see it now because we're not capable of seeing that. But in 100 years, if you were to see how much influence you made, it would be huge, because the people knew you and someone knew the people that knew you, and so on and so on and so on. Yeah, so we keep this in mind. You're always having an influence in this world. Verse 9, having recourse to this view, these enemies of the world, whose minds are destroyed, who are meager thinking and cruel actions, are there very much for the destruction of the world. So basically, two contradictions they will bring forward. They will try to trip you over with two basic things. The first is dharma. There was the asura predisposed mind, verse 9, will say, what is the point of being good? Because I see even good people suffering, going through massive pain, getting attacked randomly, also part of the crash, like anyone else of the airplane crash. What's the point of being good? Therefore, just might as well just live however you want. That is argument number one. Argument number two comes to the validity of the scriptures. And one will say, the scriptures are, number one, they're old, they're ancient, so they don't apply. But more so than that is that they cannot be proven. We can only prove things through science, which we can perceive and infer. the irony is they're true. This is a fact, isn't it? You cannot prove the scriptures through perception and inference. But where are they making a mistake? The mistake gets made when you say that the scriptures have no wisdom. The scriptures cannot teach us anything in reference to the modern world that we are living in, because it's old stuff, it's outdated. This is incorrect. The way to prove the scriptures is how? Someone tell me this. How do you prove the scriptures?
Through negation. They negate using different methods point to something that cannot be described, but they reduce everything down to the point where it points exactly to what they want to say.
There is a way to answer that is even closer. Look, make it more personal, if you could. How do you prove the scriptures? Make it personal. It is through negation, but make it even more personal than that.
It's about yourself.
Say again, Lorena?
It's about yourself.
It's about yourself.
It's about yourself.
Yeah, okay. And what would you do with the scriptures if it's about yourself? What would you do with it? Would you just read it or apply it, right? You would apply it. And what would happen when you apply it? What happens then when you apply it? When you apply the logic and the views and you start to see the world through the scriptures, what happens then? You start to prove what they're saying is correct. In other words, you, the one who takes on the scriptures, starts to live through their logic, starts to perceive through their eyes, you become the living proof of the scriptures. Therefore, the scriptures cannot be proven any way but through the one who puts faith in the scriptures long enough until you recognize their validity, pending to your own investigation and application of what they are saying. Robert, you had your hand up.
I was also going to say that it's a pramana that can't be contradicted by any other form of pramana. So you can demonstrate logically that it's always the case. It can't be contradicted.
Good. So it cannot be contradicted through any other pramana, no matter. And of course, we have the Brahma Sutra. We already, we already have a system to show the practicality of what it means to what Robert is now saying. How can you not contradict it? And then we'll, post the objection. So it's kind of like an answer, question and answer, and then it will just keep on going until I can no longer break you down, and therefore I have no option but to accept your view. So this is already in the Brahma Sutra, for example.
And it's interesting because it's well known in mathematics and science that you can have an axiomatic system where if you accept one axiom, the system is self-contained and will stand up. But Vedanta is not like that. Vedanta talks about what is and is consistent in any interpretation of reality.
Very true, very true. And okay, good. So the most accurate answer, the most accurate way to prove the scriptures, even beyond inference, even beyond negation, is how? You should answer that. You should already know by
experience and living.
By experience, becoming the living proof of that yourself. One thing that a teacher discovers very early on in their career is someone who doesn't listen, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it, because the mind first needs faith to stick long enough to see if what is being talked about has any truth for me, the individual who is trying to change his or her life. Yeah, so it always goes back deeply into this personal level between yourself, the scriptures, and the expounder of the scriptures. In fact, if we were to say the only purpose for individuals' birth on the scriptural level for their expounding would be that between you, the scriptures, and the expounder of the scriptures, you, God, and the one who's showing you the reality or the relationship between yourself and God through the pramana called the scriptures. That is the only reason why the individual is here. Yeah, everything else is incidental. Karma is incidental. You cannot not help it but to experience some, pleasure here and there. That's normal. Go on a nice sunny day. What are you going to do? I don't want any sun. You're just going to be exposed to a nice sunny day.
And the fruits of the teachings, the satisfaction and completion are self-evident once you start to live these understandings. And once you have experienced that. I think you can read about it, but you can only experience it. And then it's just an inevitable truth. So
yeah, and it's a very personal truth between yourself and that truth.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
That's why we say it's such a personal journey between yourself, the scriptures, and God. You know, it's always been like that.
Yeah.
So again, one thing that a teacher quickly notices is that there's just no point arguing someone who doesn't want to bring themselves to listen long enough to accept it, or at least to see if there's some truth into it. It just simply takes time. It just simply takes the mind to come to that level of that faith. Yeah. So that's why we say, someone said mind qualifications at the beginning of this session. So it really is that mind qualification. These two arguments, the asura sampat oriented mind will bring. Number one, there's no point following dharma, because even good people, honest individuals will lose a job, or someone's going to, they're going to, hurt themselves. They're going to hurt themselves anyway. So might as well just live life however you want and extract the most out of life. That's argument number one. And argument number two is you cannot prove the scriptures, because one, show me where is this reality that you're trying to point out? Where is Ishvara Srishtihi? Never mind even about Pratibhasika, the ultimate reality, but just Ishvara Srishtihi, where is it? Show me where. The truth is everything's already that reality. Okay, now let's continue. Verse 9, I stopped last week, so continuing verse 9 now. Ugra karmanaha, so being ignorant of the laws and orders, what is the consequence of this ignorance? One takes to cruel actions. In other words, when dharma is not valued, when it is not followed, one naturally compromises what we call that natural program. One starts to make compromises. One starts to find shortcuts. This is just a natural expression of not following dharmic program. What do you mean by compromise? Compromise means, it's okay. I can lie once. I can lie once. But we know that once that starts, then it's just a thread. It's just another lie, and I just keeps on building up. Or, how about two lovers, who are so-called in love, and they go to a sacred site, 5,000 years old rock, preserved by the indigenous civilization, the people, and they write their little hearts. Oh, John and whatever her name is, John and Stacy, love forever. Just like that. And next year, probably not even together anymore. In other words, disregarding the ethics of what is right over an infatuated temporary emotion expressing into what we call, or what they would call love, which is not really love at all. What is love? Accommodating everything simultaneously. Not only this person next to me, but the rock also is in my attention as much as she or he is. In other words, the whole environment is perceived and it is accounted for, because it does not exclude what we call love. Therefore, the person protects their environment as much as he or she protects their partner. For this reason, prabhavanti ahitaha jagataha kshayaya. They become the enemies of the world, promoting its destruction and degradation of societal values. In other words, all those values that bring us together as humanity, whereby we have something to share as one common species, such individuals will start to break that down. And what will happen then? They will say there's no price to pay in the future. Why? Because I do not believe in the consequences after death. Once I die, that's it. So whatever I've done in this life, there's no consequences after. So this means what? I've given myself permission to do whatever the individual wishes to do, because there's nothing after death. That's it. Blankness. That's the end of me. And because of that, the individual acts irresponsibly, degrading societal values. Furthermore, the younger generation learns how? Through an example. And so the younger generation discovers, it's okay not to follow customs and traditions and religion. It's okay to be louder than speak the facts. In fact, there's a nice comical portrayal of the state of politics in USA, whereby on the panel, one was asked, hey, so what should we do? What's the best way to run a government? And one of the attendees said the truth, a very deep, truthful statement that accounts the whole. But someone also spoke at the same time, but louder. And so the one who was behind the podium said, you know, you're right over there. I absolutely agree with that. But he was louder. Therefore, I'm going to follow what he said. In other words, loudness beats the truth. This is another example that we have seen how the state of affairs in the political field are playing out. The louder one wins. Who cares about the facts? Personal ambitions are more important than universal values. This is another common degradation of such behavior. Whatever I want, I'm going to get at no cost. The question of universal values, that is discounted, because why? Two purposes here come: pleasure and security. Get it and survive. That is the philosophy of such an individual. Putting materialism ahead of religion. What religion? Who needs God? I've got a house, I've got money, good income, good friends. Why do I need God? How is he going to help me? Where is he going to show up? Why should I need him? All of that is discounted. Cannot see the validity of such following the moral code of society. We have examples whereby this plays out how cybercrime today, huge ransomware. Someone in the company downloads an exe file, loads the local IP address. The IP address obviously gets distributed through the local network, and so the computers get locked down. Pay your ransomware, send a couple of bitcoins, and we will unlock your computer. So easy to do today behind the computer when no one's watching. That is another example of asura sampat, whereby the natural program is covered. And I also heard that it is now being done onto hospitals because hospitals need urgency. And so what do? I attack the hospitals, whereby providing that ransomware money is almost guaranteed. So let's attack them, disregarding the well-being of all of those who could be my mother in there. That is not a question for such thinking. Illegal organ harvesting. This is even lower in terms of rakshasa sampat, illegal organ harvesting. Someone gets clubbed, they take the organ out. It's a mere product lying on the table, and let's sell this organ through the black market. This is what we're talking about, is chapter 11, what Krishna tried to show to Arjuna, where Arjuna just couldn't bear because he didn't like the dark side of humanity. The Brahmaji with all of the teeth, and the little people going out, entering the mouth of death. Arjuna said, no, stop this huge Vishwarupa Darshana. It is too much for me. So we are talking about this aspect of human being, whereby what behavior shows when the program is covered. Now, the next verse will talk about they are deluded by a certain calculation in their thinking. Kamam ashritya dushpuram dambha manamadanditaha mohad grahitva sadgrahan pravartante shuchivrataha chintam aparimeyam cha pralayantam upashritaha kamo pabhoga paramaha etadvad iti nishchitaha asha pashashatair badhaha kama krodha parayanaha ihante kama bhogartham anyayenartha sanchayan.
Restoring the desire that is difficult to fulfill, those who are riddled with pretension demand for respect and pride, whose pursuits are unbecoming, having adopted false purposes due to delusion, engage themselves in various actions. Those committed to immeasurable concern until death, intent upon enjoyment of objects of desire, having concluded life is this much alone, committed to desire and anger, and bound by hundreds of fetters of hope, engage themselves in the illegitimate accumulation of wealth for the enjoyment of objects of desire.
Verse 10, we continue. So these are very similar topics that are all addressing the predispositions or the behavior of such an individual with asura sampat. Grahi twa asat grahan mohat. So they are holding distorted views due to this delusion. And what is this delusion? Towards what? Ishvara srishtihi, as we have spoken earlier. I see one thing is shown, but I see something else through my filters of Jiva srishtihi. So they are deluded in that aspect. And what is their delusion? What is their incorrect calculation? Finite plus finite equals infinite. Is that true? No. Finite pleasure, finite accomplishment, plus another finite. One day in the future, I may get infinite. There is simply a mathematical improbability. In other words, it always adds up to finite, no matter what it is. Finite plus finite plus finite plus finite plus finite plus finite equals finite, not infinite. So that is their miscalculation. It's like a metaphor. Suppose there's a fire and the fire is dying out, and or suppose there's a big fire and it's almost going out of control, right? That fire of desire, it just keeps on growing, it never ends. And you decide to put some ghee onto it, or maybe some charcoal onto it. And what does this do? It temporarily suppresses that fire. And so we get this temporary relief, like, oh, the fire is now out. I can now sit back and continue talking with my friends. The fire is out, but it's only temporary. The moment that coal catches that fire and starts to warm up, that fire is going to now be 2 times as big. In other words, what is their delusion? That I have temporarily resolved my discontent towards my limitation forever. However, that is only a temporary relief. That is their delusion. That is their miscalculation. Pravartante ashuchi vrataha. They act with an impure resolve. And why is this impure resolve there? Because once again, there is no fear after death. Once I die, that's it. That's the end of things. That's the end of the show. In other words, that causes me to be impure in this life, to subscribe to gratuitous desires, to lower carnal drives, because I do not fear of after death punishment. There's no traveling to other lower lokas because the person doesn't know. Therefore, they're given permission to act irresponsibly in the lower worlds, in this world. Now, the next verse will talk about Artha and Kama is the basis of all of their decisions. Security and entertainment, this is what drives me as the person in this world. Verse 11. Upashritaha aparimeyam pralayantam cha chintam. So given to their lifelong anxiety. And what is this lifelong anxiety? That, number one, that each attainment is finite. That causes anxiety in me, agitation. In other words, I can never get enough. I want more, 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 more. That's number one anxiety. Number two anxiety is that each object, each attainment that I create or that I produce creates a dependence upon it. In other words, I become a needy little person who now needs it for my survival. Because the delusion is, what is that? Calculation. I need that for my survival. And the more objects I accumulate, the more I need, the more I am dependent. That is that miscalculation, producing this lifelong anxiety. Kama upabhoga paramaha nishchitaha iti etavat. Owing to the lifelong anxiety and holding all of their enjoyment in sense objects as the highest goal for living, they are convinced that is all there is to life. Sense object gratification and indulgence, which makes the person extra concerned into worldly events. I want to know what's happening in the news because someone over there in another side of the country, another continent, their decisions influence me. What new president is over there? I need to know because it's going to influence my life, my possessions. Maybe the economy is going to go down. Maybe it's going to turn for the worse. So I need to know. So in other words, they're extra concerned about worldly events. Now, we're not saying that you shouldn't be concerned, but we're talking about extra concern, whereby I need to keep track of everything that happens around the world. Next verse, they will say that materialistic desires is what produces this shallow contentment. For that reason, they're frustrated because it is shallow contentment at the most. So verse 12, Badhaha asha pasha shatehi. So bound by strings of hundreds of expectations. What kind of expectations? How the world is to be towards me, how my employee should be towards me, how other people should be towards me, how the shopkeeper should be towards me, how friends should be towards me, how the employees, employer, everyone should be towards me. In other words, the whole person becomes the center of the universe. High expectations. So bound by the strings of hundreds of such expectations and impossible to meet standards, no matter what you do, you cannot please them because their levels always keeps on increasing. Kama krodha parayanaha, they give into continued anger and kama, desire. In other words, continued desire and anger. Why so? Because obstructed desire equals anger. Obstructed expectations, not going according as I perceived or foreseen or expected, always leads into anger. Pausing there, just take a moment now, just to make it a little bit more personal. Was there ever a time in your life when you had a certain expectation how things are to turn out and they didn't? Can you think of that now? And remember if there was that frustration or anger that was following up. Right? You had maybe met someone and you wanted to you thought they were going to be in a certain way, but they didn't, or maybe the job, your colleagues were different than you expected. And you had that expectation and that was not met. What happened after? Can you feel that anger or that frustration, that disappointment? Yeah, so that's what we mean. So unfulfilled expectations leads into anger. And they have so many strings of hundreds of expectations unmet leads into this kind of lifelong silent disappointment, covering that up with more artha and kama because I cannot bear that pain of so many disappointments. Ihante artha sanchayan anyayena kama bhogartham. So they seek iha in this world, they seek in this world hordes of wealth. How so? Through unrighteous means, for the sake of sense object enjoyments. In other words, whatever it takes to attain something, even if it's unrighteous, I will cheat, I will lie, I will get my way no matter what, because what's the highest purpose of life? Security and entertainment, and there's no punishment after death. Therefore, full green light to go ahead with the unrighteous means. Furthermore, what will happen when such personalities look at someone that is virtuous or dharmic? They will see the dharmic person as an impure and an impure person as a pure. So this means that no one can really save them, because the person who knows, the teacher who is clear, the wise one, cannot even come to them because they will see the wise one as either weak or impure. What do you know? What you're talking about is not the truth. The truth is materialistic gains and survival and enjoyment. You have no place in my life. That is such a thinking of an individual. Things like kindness, bowing, namaskara, religion, compassion, gentleness, all of these things are seen as weaknesses. And as a result, they do what? They take on a workaholic attitude. Workaholic, work more, overtime becomes a normal thing. What are you doing? I'm working overtime. Saturday, Sundays? Yes, overtime. Why so? Because the ultimate goal of life is artha and kama. No question of dharma or moksha. Verse 13 to 15 will talk about the thoughts of an asura. So if we could amplify their mind directly with a speakerphone, what kind of thoughts will we hear? So Krishna is going to quote directly the thoughts of a asura sampat thinker. Idam adyamaya labdham imam prapsye manoratham idam astidam apime bhavishyati punardhanam asau maya hatakshatruhu hanishye cha paranapi ishwaro hamaham bhogi siddho ham balavan sukhi adhyo bhijanavan asmi konyosti sadrisho maya yakshye dasyami modishye ityajnana vimohitaha.
Today this is gained by me. I will gain this also, which is pleasing to the mind. This much wealth I have, this wealth also I will have later, so they think. This enemy is destroyed by me, and I will destroy others also. I am the ruler, I am the enjoyer, I am successful, powerful, and happy. But those who are totally deluded due to lack of discrimination say, I have wealth, I was born in a very good family. Who else is there who is equal to me? I'll perform rituals, I will give, I will enjoy.
So verse 13, idam labdham maya adya. So this has been obtained by me today. Yeah, so in other words, they disregard the fact that actually it's only been obtained because of so much help that you have gotten in your lifetime. You know, the people were there, the food was there, the sun was shining, the weather was fine. You got a nice heater. There are people now running the electrical power stations to keep producing this AC current. You know, your mom was there, kind of, you were in one day, you know, little arms there on a little, what do they call it? Saddle or whatever, right? And she was helping you. Your dad was teaching you. You met some nice friends and they influenced you in a positive way. So many influences were there. And now the individual is saying, idam labdham mayadya. This has been obtained by me today. Prapsye idam manoratham me asti. I have this much wealth. Open up the bank account, check how much I have there. Prapsye idam manoratham me asti. I have this much wealth now. Let's make more money. I have this much more wealth now. Tomorrow, I made a good deal. I am this much more wealth now. So the focus is on their sense of worth on money. Bhavishyati idam api punaha. And this much I will have tomorrow. This much more I will have tomorrow. In other words, their thinking is how much to gain more. All of their intellect is reserved for moreness in respect to money and security. Okay, so they engage their buddhi into what? Materialistic gains, because the whole purpose of life is bigger family, bigger bank account, bigger beauty of wife, you know, take away those, you know, imperfections, send the wife off to some, you know, sun tanning lotion or whatever, all about that gratuitous, superficial, surface level, skin deep, period, superficiality of beauty and possessions. And you contrast that to karma yogi. So if the materialistic, if one, okay, let's not call it materialistic, an asuri sampat dominant personality, if their sense of self-worth is how much have I gained, how much do I have, what is my self-worth, how much have I gained for myself, what is a karma yogi's sense of self-worth, how much have I contributed, given, loved, made a difference in this world, in my circle of influence. And then the next verse, they further play the role of Ishvara. Verse 14, asau shatruhu hataha mayame hanishye aparanapi. In reference to the rivals, and obviously one who has money will have some rivals there, most likely being in some position. This rival has been destroyed by me. Ha ha. I shall destroy the remaining competitors also. Let's send them a few fake reviews. Let's, you know, Google false reviews. You've got Yelp, you've got Amazon. All of this is a tactful position, the target of destruction. Some bad PR, get a copywriter to write a very convincing story made up, and then send that through the PR to defame their name. I shall destroy my competitors also. In other words, they cannot stand bigger and better. Why so? Because the personality is placed in my sense of bigness. And if someone compromises that, it threatens my individuality. So I have to destroy them. That is the only way to go about it. Aham Ishwaraha. I am the Lord. We have a story in the, was it Mahabharata, whereby Hiranyakashipu, his son, Prahlada, was chanting Om Namo Narayanaya, Om Namo Narayanaya. In other words, I prostrate to Lord in the form of Narayana. However, Prahlada said, stop, son, I alone am God. Stop doing this at once. I cannot stand you chanting someone else's name. That didn't work out very well. Aham bhogi. I am the enjoyer of all of this. I am the doer. I am the enjoyer once again. Aham siddhaha balavan sukhi. I am successful, powerful, and happy. In other words, it is a delusion that one is really happy, but as we spoke previously, they are bound by strings of unmet expectations, swimming in discontent, and yet they say, I am happy and successful. Asmi adhya abhijanavan. So I am rich and come from a noble family. In other words, one talks, this is a common thing. I come from a family of the sages. My grandfather was this, my grandmother was this. They were in a very powerful position. But why are they saying that? Even though contributing nothing to the family, just for the sake of name and fame. My grandfather was so-and-so. Did you know that? Fun fact. Whereby, but the individual, you ask them, what have you done in this life? What have you added to this family lineage that you speak of? Well, I've inherited a lot of money. So you haven't really done anything, just simply taken it because it was provided there. In other words, they will use the name of their family to boost their position in the eyes of others. Kaha anyaha asti sadrishaha maya. Who else is equal to me? Now, who else is smarter than me? Who is more beautiful than me? Who is pretty as I am? Who is capable as I am? In other words, it is once again, a Jiva Srishtihi established in their narrow standpoint, unable to see there is someone actually prettier than you, there is someone that's more powerful, and there's someone that's more richer than you. No, there isn't. I am alone, am that. Yakshye dasyami. I will perform yajnas. Yajnas are rituals. Why? For the sake of showing the public that I am a good person. So how does a religious, proper, dharmic protocol of going about it? You perform your yajna because it is meaningful to you. You are offering to a higher altar the Lord, whereby when such an individual offers or performs a yajna, it is to be seen, to be shown to the public, I am a good person that you can trust. Dasyami, I shall give charity. I shall give charity whereby my name is definitely heard and well known. Okay, and doing all of this, modishye, I shall rejoice. What is happening here? The narrative is being reinforced that the highest purpose of life is indeed name and fame and position in society. Okay, we have established that. Which means that as soon as someone comes who tries to provide a different perception, a different narrative to such a mind, they will discard it. In other words, they will not buy into anything that opposes their already notion. So this means it's very, very hard to change such an individual because the narrative is very strongly etched into their psyche. So therefore, they distance themselves farther and farther away from the light, and no one can save them, owing to that self-pride, that sense of self-upliftment. And no wise person wants to speak to such an individual because of arrogance. The moment arrogance shows up, one does not want to come near them. So what is their path laid out? Okay, so verse 16, Aneka chitta vibrantaha moha jala samavrtaha prasaktah kama bhogeshu patanti narakeshu chau.
Those who are completely deluded by many types of thoughts, covered by the net of delusion, lack of discrimination, and totally committed to the enjoyment of desirable objects, they fall into the unclean places of pain.
Unclean places of pain is a pretty way of saying naraka, hell. We'll see what that is about. Aneka chitta vibrantaha. So carried away by such narratives as we have seen in verse 13 to 15, what happens? Moha jala samavrataha prasaktaha kama bhogeshu, and encircled in their web of delusion, which is further multiplied by their preoccupation with sense objects. What happens to such individuals after death? Patanti narake ashuchau. They fall into the impure, greasy, muddy hell. Now we need to provide some logic before, because the mind is going to go, aha, hell. Okay, I've heard this before. Every religion will talk about hell. So let's give a Vedantic standpoint of what hell, naraka, means in reference to living. What is hell in reference to living? I think we know this by now, right? A mind that is stuck in a loop, unable to get out of that loop. A certain narrative that is depressing pulls the individual down. And this is a genuine psychological condition today, whereby you have to find ways to pull the person out of that darkness into some light. And this can eventually lead into suicide. That is the hell in reference to living. Hell in reference to death. In other words, since artha and kama for such an individual was never intended to be the ultimate aim of life, or at least while we are inheriting a human body, but the individual has violated that rule, what happens next life? That jiva who has violated that rule, who has pursued artha and kama in this life, they will either gain, let's go from the top to the lowest, a human body in a considerably less oriented, privileged position, a less privileged position, maybe a position whereby it's about survival. Born in maybe a low, still with mom and dad, obviously, but in a strong survival-oriented family. Maybe food scarcity, famine, could be even a different country where it's a conflict zone, or it could go even lower, an animal. Of course, now an animal, whether you're a parrot, a dog, or that also has a certain validity, because if you're, for example, a parrot, then we want to take photos of a parrot. If you're a crow, then get off my yard. I don't want to see a crow. So even that can play some importance there. Or a plant, maybe you're a fig tree or a rose or a flower. Or the lower 7 worlds. We got AVS, TRMP, AVS, Atala, Vitala, Sutala, TRM, Talatala, Mahat, Rasatala, Mahatala, last one, Patala, 7 lower worlds. That was a mnemonic, by the way, to memorize. In other words, the lowest they can go is the Patala, whereby the individual cannot go any lower in any part of the universe than this world of so-called Naraka. Now let's talk hell in reference to the lower world, these 7 lower worlds, because we talk about this in religion and we think about, okay, so what, person burning forever or something, and all these stories we have to just address right now. So what do we mean by when we say, how can hell be eternal, right? How can hell or heaven be eternal? Let's break this logic down. First of all, it cannot be eternal because, number one, the duration of someone's stay at any place is proportional to the magnitude of their past deeds. Another way of saying that is the proportion to how many deeds I've done determines what kind of place I stay. If I'm a really good fella, then I get to stay in a, maybe a White House, for a long time, 4 years. If I've done a little bit, then I'll stay in a different, maybe a hierarchy or lower position, and I'll be a manager or something. So in other words, the deeds always determine how long the person stays at whatever place. That is logic number one, why hell or heaven cannot be permanent. And we all know that our deeds on earth are only as good as they are. They're never limitless. They're never infinite. Therefore, they cannot be eternal. The question of staying anywhere eternally. That's logic number one. Logic two, why hell or heaven is not permanent, is because pain or pleasure requires a physical body, yes, but which physical body lasts forever? No physical body lasts forever. In other words, that disregards the point of eternal suffering, eternal enjoyment. And number three, the duration depends once again on the person's learning process. Some people learn really quickly and they get out of their misery really quickly. Some of them stay there. So it all depends on the mind. The duration of suffering or pleasure depends on the one who is experiencing that suffering or pleasure. Some people get really bored quickly and see the limitations of pleasure. Get me out of heaven. I don't want to see heaven anymore. I've seen the limitations of it. Get me back down on earth so I can continue my journey. Some of them want to stay there a really long time. So once again, the vasana will dictate how long the person chooses to stay there. Some like to indulge in their miseries. They make it a thing. Let's go to a misery circle. Let's share and pour out our tears. Okay, we all now feel good pouring out our tears. Some of them stay there for a long time. Some of them say, I don't want this. This is too boring. I've done it all and there's no more tears to shed. I'm out of here. Therefore, it always depends on the attunement of the mind. Look at Naraka as a washing machine. What happens inside a washing machine? Things spin. A lot of, in other words, they wash, they purify the person, they purify the mind. Why so? Because a lot of pain always purifies the person. It matures them up. In other words, the subtle body is now ready to move on, come back to earth and continue its journey. So hell, or this Naraka, these 7 lower worlds, can be looked at 7 different types of washing machines made by different brands. Some of them spin really slowly, so it's not that of a big deal. Some of them spin on a centrifuge, high speed. You don't want to be there. That's the lowest world, right? But either way, it is an experience to purify the subtle body. Therefore, they are ready to continue their journeys. And once again, why are we pointing this out? We need to answer that because so we can see the dark side of humanity when it is covered by this natural program of Dharma. So this way you remain strong composure. Next time you turn on the TV and you see these unspeakable acts, you enjoy a certain level of objectivity.
Just a question about the unmet expectations, because sometimes that can be relating to likes and dislikes, and then sometimes that can be relating to Dharma. So, just going to a shop and they don't have the tea that I want or something like that, that's something that you shouldn't get angry about. But if I bought a car and someone deliberately misled me and good car, that they've violated Dharma. So what is there? There's a difference in that. What's the anger?
So in other words, that's justified anger in the light of the natural program versus unjustified anger in the light of Jiva Srishtihi. So there's justified anger in the light of Ishvara Srishtihi. So for example, someone's trying to injure my child, I will immediately act and I will definitely get angry. That is justified because that is a natural program for protecting your offspring. Whereas the unjustified is on the basis of what I expected, on the basis of what I've been told. In my family, this is how people should treat you, and I take this throughout life. And if you don't treat me like this, then I get angry. That is unjustified.
Also, you mentioned about somebody working overtime and lots of putting time into work for the money, and what if the money is actually for the wealth? well-being of the family.
Of course, yeah.
So that's, I mean, I don't consider that as something.
No, absolutely not. This is justified once again. What we're talking about here is even though you are securely financially well off, and there's no rational reason how more would serve, you keep on gaining just for the sake of saying to your friends how one is so rich and so on. But for the sake of working, because it is, you have to support yourself, that is totally justified. We're not talking about that.
Actually, in the heaven, there is no physical bodies. Only souls are enjoying their life according to their punyas. If that is the case, how they will return to the world and how they are enjoying in that heaven?
Okay, so first of all, you always need a gross body to enjoy or to think or to experience. So yes, they do gain a gross body, but it is a much subtler version of the gross body. It's not so heavy. It's a different material. And in terms of coming back, it's just like a rocket. As much fuel as you have in a rocket, owing to your time of filling that rocket ship, is as long as that rocket will fly up. When that fuel exhausts itself, then you'll realize, oh, I should have filled up that rocket a little bit more. But because all of our actions are always finite, we can only experience finite punyam, finite enjoyment. In other words, that's why we work, because no action is ever infinite. That's why you want to work one more day, and just keep yourself healthy one more time. So there's no such thing as infinite action. And because there's no such thing as infinite action, there's no such thing as infinite punya or papa, which means that eternal suffering or enjoyment is simply a logical fallacy. How they return, when they return, that is beyond our knowledge.
I was at a grocery store yesterday and I was queuing. I was running late because someone was coming over for dinner. I was grabbing something last minute. I was queuing, waiting to pay, and then someone cut the queue and came to the front. And I just got a bit irritated, or just thought, rather than irritated, it was just like, you need to do the right thing. Like, don't cut a queue. People have been queuing up. Yes. So when it was my turn to pay, the lady had gone forward. She looked like she was in a rush. And I said, excuse me, there is a queue. And then she goes, oh, sorry, I didn't see that. And then, so anyway, I went forward and I paid. And then someone else actually let her go before them. So I left the shop and then I was walking towards my car. And then I saw her running past me. And then I realized she was running to catch the train. Oh, wow. And then I realized what was my expectations around what is right and what is wrong in terms of, just common, common
societal norm, or
that's right. Courtesy, common courtesy, yeah. And then there's always a context to that. And I felt, and everything that the last few weeks of the Gita class came flooding into me. And I'm just like, what the hell were you doing, thinking that or doing that? Was it that important that you couldn't let her? It was just the idea of her, even if she was running late, she could even have said, I'm running late, instead expectation. So it comes back to expectation of what people should be doing in society.
Yeah, you're right. You did have an expectation. I think you acted rightly so in that situation, because people shouldn't cut you off. However, there's always that twist to the story where I didn't really, owing to our perception, we can't see the future.
No, I was comfortably walking to my car, which I had control over my time, but she did not have control over the train time, which would obviously come every half an hour or something,
Yeah, true. I mean, in this case, if I was in that situation, I would just, obviously, definitely I would not feel very good about that. But we can still control how we feel about that. You can say, oh, may she get on time. May God bless her soul. Oopsie daisy or something.
That's right.
And there's not much we can do in that, but that's a really good example how our innocent ignorance, we don't know, can cause us to misinterpret something, even if we acted in our best intentions. What a good example.
But this is like the movie Sliding Doors. Like Gayatri could have done the lady a favor because she could have caught the train and something bad might have happened. So
right.
She might have met somebody or found some money while she was waiting.
Yeah. She got mugged or something, but now so Ishwara acted through Gayatri, so now the lady was saved.
Thanks for that, David. I feel a lot better now.
Andre.
Speaks Thomas.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
So just on the Vedas and the proof, the discussion we were having before, if you teach me Trigdrisha Viveka, that I can confirm in my own experience.
Yeah.
If you tell me that an object is mithya, that I can confirm in my own experience.
Yeah.
However, there are aspects of the Veda which I cannot and I'll never be able to confirm. I'll never be able to tangibly experience punyam papam. And obviously, I'll never be able to experience the creation of the world because I was not created then. But the Vedas still have a theory of creation.
Yeah.
So does the Westerners have the theory of creation. So I'm curious to know, what should our attitude be towards those concepts?
Those concepts which we cannot directly prove no matter what. So as we said last week, that Vedas are considered the sixth sense. And there is an aspect of this, just that acknowledging or accepting that possibility that they are indeed, or could be talking about things that we simply have no other way to confirm except through their Shabda Pramana, through their mere words. That is one way. If you don't want to accept that, then you have to ask yourself, what am I missing out if I don't accept that? You're actually not missing out on a lot because you just confirmed yourself. You can't prove mithya. You also can't prove Drikdrisha Viveka. So the most important aspects you can prove directly through experience. And funnily enough, they matter most. And those things that we cannot confirm, whether there was past life or not, does that really matter? It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really make much of a difference in your life. Yeah. So, you can look at it like that.
Andre, is that similar to the fact that, we don't have control over birth and death, and also we don't have any control over how our body functions, how our mind functions? We think we are in control of our mind and our thoughts, but we are not really in control.
Yeah, good. So in other words, this is what we call Maya. So that which is yet to arise, that potential that is already stored there, and it's already playing out, but we just don't see how it's playing out. So cancer develops way before the doctors can even detect anything. It's been in development for many years. Lifestyle choices, even psychosomatic thinking, and so on. All of these contributing factors are there, but we just don't see it. And yet it's already on that thread of continuity of that lifestyle, it's already happened. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.